What's up and good morning, War Report family? It's your man, Ike Jones, right here, back in the saddle with you guys. Today, we're talking about Kam Stutts. Is he in the driver's seat to be the starting guard for Auburn University this fall? We're going to do a little talk about it this morning. Y'all know how we do War Report style. Let's drop it on them.
You are now listening to the War Report. Drop.
Morning drop once again, back in the saddle. Your guy Ike Jones, sponsored by RogueShop.com. We are here, the War Report's morning drop. You guys, welcome in. It is a Wednesday, July 17th. Day's just going by too fast for your guy, man. But I am glad to be back here running solo this morning right here on the morning drop. And we want to make sure that you guys, my son trying to get in here and get some camera time. We want to make sure that you guys already understand what's happening with your Auburn Tigers. SEC Media Days, folks announced B. Will and Mike G were in here yesterday talking a little bit about their thoughts on everything. And man, we want to just talk about Kam Stutts. The surprise, I don't know that anybody predicted Kam Stutts as being the guy, being the third person on the list as far as people that were going to be participants at SEC Media Days. And it surprised me. But I've heard Kam Stutts speak, definitely a senior member of this team, has a lot of snaps under his belt. But the question is his presence at SEC Media Days indicative of the fact that he could potentially be a starter this fall for Auburn University? I definitely want to hear your thoughts about it. I'm going to give my thoughts on it. First and foremost, I know it's definitely way too early to even have the conversation about who's going to be a starter at a position that I feel like there's going to be a lot of competition. Make no mistakes about it. There are some viable candidates to come in here and get starting snaps, but is Kam Stutts one of those guys that could potentially do that? Before we get too far into the conversation, you guys know what you need to do. For me, you need to be sharing this video, get more people involved in this conversation. Make sure you go ahead and give us a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comment section. We'll definitely come back and get to those as always right here, Morning Drop Style. We want to hear your thoughts, but what are your thoughts on Kam Stutts? Is he a guy that should be starting for Auburn right now? Is he in the driver's seat? Not saying will he definitely start in the fall, but is it his job to lose there for the starting guard position? Is he in the driver's seat to start this fall for Auburn? I want to hear your thoughts on it. Let's just take a look at the numbers, right? So, you know, we over here want to look at Pro Football Focus and use that as kind of a universal way to do metrics. Kam Stutts here last year, overall, his offensive grade at guard, he played 520 total snaps. He was rated as 61.4, which is kind of not bad, but it's not great, right? And he had his best performances really against the lesser competition when you look at where his best grades came from. And his best grades were against some of the lesser competition. I specifically want to look at the pass blocking grades, right? Like the games where he graded out the worst: Penn State, Arkansas, and Alabama. Those were colossal beatdowns for Auburn, and he didn't do so great pass blocking in any of those games. Run blocking grades were solid throughout the season. The lowest graded games were Penn State and Alabama. Again, those two games did not perform particularly well in those, according to PFF. Was not heavily penalized last year, had 5 penalties total on the season, but did have a few of those. So his best grades overall in his career at Auburn, his best overall year as far as a grade overall would have been in 2019. That would have been his sophomore season. He only had 16 snaps that season, so not a really large sample size. But he played primarily, when he played well, it was at the right guard position. So that means it's going to be interesting, right? Because I think that Jeremiah Wright is a guy that could be a factor in this race. He was injured a lot during the spring, so I don't know that this staff has had a really a good chance to evaluate him totally. He did not play in A-Day this year because of that injury. And I think that's probably, if we're being honest, the biggest issue with Jeremiah Wright is not the fact that he's been bouncing around between the defense and the offense. It's the fact that he's been oft injured in his career at Auburn. And is that going to play a factor into as to whether or not he's going to be a starter for this team and get enough time to be able to get acclimated to this system and kind of understand what the coaches need and get him a chance to give an impression for these coaches? You can say the same thing for Tate Johnson as a guy who was injured last season. He started at the center, right? He was really supposed to be an interior lineman guard, but he started last year at center with the departure of the starting center from last season, Nick Brahms, who was supposed to be coming back, but then just kind of had the whole situation where his career essentially was going to be over because of a lot of the things that were happening with him physically. Tate Johnson comes in, starts the season at center, but then gets injured early in the season, doesn't come back, has the elbow injury. Going into the spring, still not fully healthy, again gets injured. So are the injury concerns going to be a problem for both of those guys at the two guard spots, who I thought really had the inside track on garnering one of those? You heard the early comments from Coach Hugh Freeze about the leadership that Tate Johnson had started to really develop in that offseason with them, and he was displaying a lot of that leadership in the locker room coming into that season. So it naturally felt like Tate Johnson really had the inside track. I saw what Jeremiah Wright did on the field at the end of the season. I saw the passion that he brings to the position. And I thought, man, he was an engine that really got that run game going when he started to get his reps in Mississippi State and subsequently going forward into Ole Miss, where the run game started to pick up. Now, I do realize that reverse that was at Ole Miss and then going into Mississippi State. I do realize a lot of that had to do with the fact that Robbie Ashford was the quarterback at that point in time, a little bit more acclimated to the system that they started to cater towards his ability to run. But you just saw the tenacity that he brought to that offensive line when he started to get his opportunity in those games. And it felt as if he was on the inside track for that. But again, injuries kind of derail both of those situations with both Tate Johnson and with Jeremiah Wright. Kam Stutts, on the other hand, is a guy who got a lot of snaps for the most of the season, right? He was in there during those tough times. As you saw the games, like Texas A&M was, I think the game, I'm looking here at his PFF stuff from last year, was the game where he had the best overall rating. And we did do a pretty good job running the ball during that game. Kam Stutts had some good games towards the tail end of the season. That entire offensive line kind of revitalized itself with a little bit of the shuffling of the deck. Again, with a guy like Jeremiah Wright sliding in there. But the question still remains, is Kam Stutts ready in this now his fifth year as a senior on this offensive line to not only be a leader in the locker room and a leader in seniority, but a leader on the field on that offensive line that's going to be starting probably, if Kam Stutts, let's just say Kam Stutts is a starter, we're likely going to be starting two new guys at tackles, right? So the tackles will be new. Got experience at tackle, but nothing here at Auburn and nothing here in the SEC. Kam Stutts would be the only incumbent SEC starter on that squad because your center is likely going to be. I don't think that Jaleel Irvin right now has the inside route on that center position. I do think that it's going to be an Avery Jones situation there at center. So the question is the guards, right? Are you going to slide the young man from Western Kentucky, Gunnar Britton, in there to be a guard? Or is he going to keep a tackle spot? Do you get Jaden Muskrat and slide him inside to a guard position? Or is he going to remain at the two deep there at the tackle? And then you have your guards that are going to be fighting it out between Kam Stutts, Tate Johnson, and Jeremiah Wright there. Kam Stutts, again, played the vast majority of his good snaps at the right guard position. So would he be battling it out with someone there? And the question I have to ask myself that I asked at the beginning of this, is the selection to SEC Media Days a tip of the hat in that direction, that he has the inside track on that? Connor Lew, another person I haven't mentioned there as the true freshman. Is he going to start a true freshman to begin the season, or is it going to be a thing where they're going to be getting him in if somebody doesn't perform well? I don't know the answer to any of those questions specifically right now, but I do want to answer the question in my own opinion. I heard Mike G and B Will talk about this a little bit yesterday, and in my own opinion, I do think that this kind of indicates that he's in the driver's seat right now. I think the same thing there for Elijah out there on the outside as to whether or not he's leading for starting. At least in the two deep at the jack position. That's going to be a rotational place, but I think that the experience that he brings to that position and his leadership on the field is going to be something that's going to be important for that. But I think that Kam Stutts probably has the inside track on that. And the question is, what does that indicate about where everybody else is on the offensive line based upon what we know about Kam Stutts right now? Heard good things about what he's been doing during the offseason as far as his preparation and how he's coming along. But where does that mean that our offensive line is as a unit? That's health wise, right? Because we do know that health has been a concern. I've detailed those situations with the other guards that are on the team. And then from an experience standpoint, with some of the younger guys that are coming in, I haven't mentioned guys like Brayton Joyner, who are true freshmen that are going to be playing interior offensive line. So there are guys that are available there for the interior offensive line that just haven't had any snaps of experience. It's going to be interesting to see how Coach Freeze and offensive line coach Jake Thornton handle that offensive line room, specifically considering that we do have that early game against a team in UMass that, let's not kid ourselves, should not be able to compete with Auburn early in the season. If they do, that does not bode well for what we feel like Auburn can do down the back half of the season. But UMass shouldn't be competitive in that game. Auburn should be, at least physically, from a standpoint of athleticism and physicality, able to dominate that game. Do we get an opportunity to see some of those younger guys in there? And is it going to be truly a competition even going into the season, right? We know there's going to be a competition this fall. I think there's going to be competition at literally every position, especially considering what we don't know about the Jarquez Hunter situation. I think that every room right now is competitive, and there are very few spots that are guaranteed to anyone as far as number one on the depth chart when we get into two deep rotations and charts that are going to be coming out close to the end of the fall. When we start seeing those come out, I don't think that there are very few people, I think, that are guaranteed to be the number one in any of those spots. The question you still have to ask yourself is, how long into the season is that competition going to continue to linger? And are there going to be people who we have locked up and saying, this is the guy? I think that you need to have that along your offensive line, someone who you have as a cemented, solidified starter, and absent of injury, that person should start every single game for you that season. And that's the way that you build continuity along your offensive line as the season progresses. If you're still shuffling the deck like we were often last season, some due to injury, some due to performance, then I don't think that bodes well for your ability to play well towards the end of the season, because that continuity is important when you start talking about your offensive line. Anyway, I've done enough rambling about myself here. I do want to hear your thoughts on this. If you guys definitely don't know that we are sponsored by Harmon Mechanical here, harmonmechanical.com is a place where you can go and get your AC and your heat taken care of. Heating and air company right there in the Auburn, Alabama area. Head to harmonmechanical.com to see all of the services that they offer. Give them a call at 334-219-0717. And they can get an initial consultation set up for you and make sure that they give you options about ways that you can take care of your HVAC system. Harmon Mechanical is there when you need air. We're going to head to the comment section and hear what you guys have been talking about this morning, or see what you all have been talking about this morning in terms of the offensive line. Let's back it up here and see what we got. A lot of good mornings coming in here. What else do we got here? I did not know that 7/12 is post Slurpee Day, 7/11. Got what you're saying there. Boom. P-Pass giving us the info there. All right. James Barnett jumps in and says, is it possible that Freeze got input from the team, almost like when they vote for team captains? It is definitely possible that he got input from the team. Listen, what I do know about a lot of these athletes is some of them don't want to go up there and talk in front of cameras, right? And it's sometimes it's like, it's almost a recruiting pitch to get guys to decide they want to be out there and talking in front of the media. And some guys just don't want to do that. So you have a small pool of people who actually don't mind doing it. And then you shrink that pool even more to people who you feel like are going to be good representatives. I will say this first and foremost, and I should have stated this at the beginning. Definite congrats to Kam Stutts for being called upon to do this. I do think that he's a great representative of Auburn football team and Auburn University as a whole. He has stuck through a lot of change And he made a decision to come back for his senior season, not knowing if he was going to be the starter and deciding he was going to fight it out for a spot, regardless of the fact that he could have transferred somewhere else and gone to quote unquote greener pastures as far as his ability to guarantee himself some playing time. And he decided to stay here at Auburn. I think that there is something to be said about that for a guy that has made that type of decision, and he's Auburn through and through, and has just decided this is the place that he wants to finish his playing career. So it could be a reward for that level of loyalty. And again, he's well spoken and a good representative. He hasn't been in any trouble or anything since he's been here at school. So I think there's a combination of those things. But I do think that it's possible that it was part of the situation to say, hey, teammates feel like he's a good representative of us. Let him get up there and not send someone who hasn't been at the school very long. You've already got Elijah McAllister, who's going to be a transfer. Let's send one of the incumbent guys from the team over there as well to represent us on the offensive line. Corey Weber jumps in and says, need the 5 best linemen on the field. In my opinion, that would be Wright and Muskrat at guard. Interesting there. Jaden Muskrat, I haven't looked at what his snap counts have been, but I do know at Tulsa he played a lot of tackle. So I can go back and take a look at how much he's played guard. But listen, the 5 best linemen at each of those positions is definitely going to be preferable. I think it's going to be an intense battle going into the season and seeing, during fall camp, who is going to be that combination of 5. I think this is going to be one of the tougher things that Jake Thornton's going to have to figure out. To be honest, I think he has one of the tougher jobs, not just figuring out who the best 5 are, but where do they fit best along the line. And there's not a lot of practices to be able to figure that sort of thing out as you get guys in there and fill them in at spaces and get them rotated and say, okay, you here at right guard. Okay, no, we're going to flip you over to left guard. Okay, I feel like he's better at left guard, but is he the best guy at left guard? Let's get somebody else in there at left guard. And then starting to figure out what that pecking order is going to be. Going to be interesting to see how they parse that out during the season. Jake Thornton, not his first rodeo, so we'll see how he's able to put that together. Ant Robinson jumps in and says it depends if Tate or Wright isn't. I feel like those two are the guards. So echoing a little bit of what Corey said, except a change there with Tate Johnson being the guy that he likes at the other guard. Chris S. asked a really good question. How do our incoming guys' PFF numbers look versus lesser times or higher competition? So looking at the difference between how they played against their better competition, Power 5 guys, how do their PFF numbers look? I will be able to answer this question specifically. I've already put these numbers together as we get into our room breakdown. So we are going to look at how our offensive linemen compared in Pro Football Focus. I'm going to look at every last one of them. We're going to have an exhaustive look at the offensive line coming up here soon after SEC Media Days. We'll get into our room breakdowns. So I'm going to put a pin in that, and we are going to look at those things very specifically. Don't worry, Chris, I got you. And I do have some film coming up on some of this stuff too. So stay tuned for that. More offensive line film coming. 94 AU alum says, it doesn't necessarily mean he starts. He's a good representative of Auburn for media days. I'll have to agree that I don't think that this means that he definitely starts. I will say that I think that means that he has the inside track, though. I think that he might be in the driver's seat if they were. And this is the question that you have to ask. Like, nobody can predict the future. But the question you have to ask yourself when you start looking at all of these things is, if we were to play a game Saturday, who do you think would start? And I think that this nod indicates that Kam Stutts, if we were to play a game Saturday, if UMass was coming up this coming Saturday, I think Kam Stutts would be the starter if they had to put out a starting lineup today. Does that mean he's going to start against UMass first game this fall? Absolutely does not. There's still a lot of competition left to be had for that. Lee Carter jumps in and says, Wright is my guy. I feel like he gets healthy and he'll win his spot back. I like Jeremiah Wright a lot. I've been on record as saying I think that he's one of the more crucial pieces to the nasty necessary for an offensive line to be the kind of offensive line that can dominate in the SEC. Big fan of him. Looking forward to seeing what he's able to do when he is fully healthy. Hopefully he's going to be able to do that. Corey Weber jumps back in and says he thinks that Connor Liu is a dark horse starter at guard. He's put on size and he's mean as hell. He's got a little bit of that nasty in him. Listen, he's had it in high school. Nasty is something that you really can't teach. You can teach physicality, you can teach pad level, and you can teach guys how to get stronger and better technique, but you can't really teach nasty, man. You kind of either have that or you don't. Connor Liu has that in spades. Looking forward to seeing what he's going to be able to do. Pete Pass jumps in and says, "Is Wright healthy? Wondering if this possible Brahms 2. If this is a possible Brahms 2.0, another version of Nick Brahms. Nick Brahms wasn't, ready to play last year. I mean, he was oft injured, but often playing though. So I don't know. Jeremiah Wright is a guy that has struggled with injuries. Let's be clear throughout his collegiate career. I don't know where he sits right now. I can definitely try to find out for you guys what we have. They don't do a lot of injury report type of stuff during summer workouts. So I can check and see how much he's been working out, that sort of thing. He wasn't healthy to end the spring. I don't know where he sits right now this summer as far as his health is concerned. Let's see here. Haley jumps in and says, "I feel like if a true freshman is starting at a position, we have issues with that position. Definitely never what you want to be doing." I don't know that I agree that you necessarily have issues if a true freshman is starting. It could just be ready to play, right? You could be really good and start as a true freshman and decide this is a really kind of a coaching decision, especially with offensive line being such a developmental position. And it's really hard to develop at that position without getting reps. With the way that our season starts out with UMass, Cal, and Samford, that could be a good opportunity to get a freshman in there and starting and getting acclimated to the game speed, even though it's not SEC game speed. Just being able to play and understand side by side with people during the heat of the game, get a little bit of that, cobwebs out or whatever, the nerves, blah, 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 that freshmen are inevitably going to get playing at this next level, especially going on the road to Cal early. But if you feel like the guy is talented enough, trial by fire sometimes is the best way, specifically for offensive linemen, to get them out there. Now, to kind of agree with you a little bit, because we have starters, or excuse me, we have incumbent guys coming in that have had starting reps at the Power 5 level, or at least at the collegiate level. When you talk about guys like Avery Johnson, when you do talk about the P5 level or even the SEC level with Tate Johnson, Avery Jones, excuse me, Tate Johnson and Jeremiah Wright, Gunnar Britton Wright, Jaden Muskrat, all these guys have played at the collegiate level, some of them at the SEC levels, specifically here at Auburn. Avery Jones played at North Carolina before transferring to East Carolina. So he has been in the Power 5 environment as well prior to coming to Auburn. So it's going to be interesting to see where it happens. So I do think that it's a mixed bag as to whether or not that's an indicator of good or bad. If we have a lot of freshmen starting, one guy starting, I don't think it's a big deal. Two or three of them, I think you have a little bit more of a problem there. I think it's going to be helpful that we have a quarterback who has had some starting experience, to be able to be behind that line, whether that is Robbie Ashford or Peyton Thorne. Both of them have had starting experience. So an experienced quarterback may be a little bit more helpful to a younger offensive line, but I don't think it's so bad if it's only one of those guys. Um, uh, Jordan Martin says, "Would be surprised if Kam starts. I think him going to media days is strictly the leadership and a good representative for Auburn." I would not be surprised. Again, I've already stated this. I would not be surprised if he started, if we were doing that decision today. But a lot of time left to make that decision. Um, Eric Montgomery says, "Maybe the coaching staff is starting with a clean slate and giving all players an opportunity to create their path on playing time." I think this is absolutely the way you have to do it. You can't come in with preconceived notions. You can look at the tape, and the tape can tell you one thing, but what you don't know definitively from the tape from some of these other guys is how they're going to play in the SEC. You absolutely know what Kam Stutts is going to bring you thus far in the SEC, and you could decide, hey, man, what he was doing out there was a result of scheme and not really being placed in the right kind of positions to do the things that he does really well. And you can say, hey, fresh slate, let's start from, zero, and we're just going to let you go out there and battle it. And again, I did hear that he was doing good things during the spring. So if he had a good spring, it is an opportunity for him to come in with his seniority and playing experience to potentially jump up there into that 2 deep and get some starting experience. Let's see. Chris S jumps in and says special freshmen are few and far between. More likely than not, it's not a good sign if your roster has freshmen as your best option. Again, I'll agree with you. They are few and far between, but I don't agree that it's not a good sign if that freshman is starting, is specifically with how our season starts. So we'll see where that goes, but agree and disagree a little bit of both on that one. Let's see what else we got in here. Riley M jumps in and says, I think he's got a good shot, but I think he's definitely picked the I won't say anything. I picked the I won't say anything crazy to embarrass the program group. Gotta agree with this. And I think that this is the best way to do this. Um, you know, um, you don't want somebody going up there saying something crazy at SEC media days. You want guys that are going to be confident, but they're going to, stick to the messaging of what they need to be saying, that have a little maturity about them. So when they are asked questions potentially by media members that want to get you to get some sort of, bulletin board material, some crazy soundbite, you're going to have the guys that are less likely to do that. I think that's the way that you want it to be. For your, especially when you're a coach that's coming in new to the program, right? First year back and coming in under this ridiculous cloud that exists right now with Hugh Freeze. You want to just listen, let's get through the first SEC media days with as little drama as possible. So um, hopefully we can do that and just get out of there unscathed and come back in and um, get back home and get back to work without having to deal with a bunch of extra stuff. Let's see. Haley jumps back in and says we have well-documented issues at O-line. I think that's why we think Connor Lew might start. This is definitely one of those things where you've in your mind the offensive line hasn't been good, so let's just not start any of those guys going into next season because they couldn't possibly have gotten that much better during the offseason. Listen, the offensive line as a unit was bad, but there were some bright spots. Now, again, I don't know that Kam Stutts was necessarily a bright spot. He had bright moments. If he can string more of those bright moments together, then I think he is a guy that is going to be physically, he's ready. We know that. Mentally, I think he's good. We just need to get him into, a system that I think works well for what his physicality dictates. But I wouldn't count him out in this race, but we're going to let the coaches determine that for sure. Definitely nobody's looking at the morning drop and hearing Ike Jones talk about offensive line and saying to themselves, he has a good point. Maybe we're going to reevaluate that. I doubt Jake Thornton is sitting here wondering what I feel about his offensive line decisions. But I'm still in here talking about it, so I'm going to continue to do that. But I do think that it is part of the fan narrative to say, these guys weren't that good before. What makes us think they're going to be good this year coming up? We need to just get a fresh start. And that's why people put a young guy who has a lot of potential in there in Connor Lew as having the possibility of starting when you weigh in what the guys before him have done. And that's not a bad thing to think about. But I do think that, a guy like Kam Stutts could potentially jump in and pay some dividends with his experience and having seen some things. But the question is whether or not he's going to be the starter day one, or if he's going to be a serviceable backup who has experience, who you can get in there in case one of those newer guys doesn't pan out. That's another question that you'd have to ask yourself regarding all those things. Let's see if there's anything else here. A lot of talk about, recruiting, all those sorts of things. We definitely have more of that we'll be talking about tonight when we get back in here. But that's all I got for you guys today. As always, make sure you check in with our sponsor, rogueshop.com. Use code REPORT to get a little something off of your purchase. We'll be back at you, as I just said, tonight with the midweek report. Talking a little bit more about where we are with recruiting and some of those things. But make sure you guys like the video before you get out of here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share the video with somebody else. I'm out of here until later on tonight. Until then, and as always, War Eagle, peace.